This is the RPG Dungeons & Dragons. Not exactly the best edition of the game, but here it is. It's a game that demands adventure and chance. We need numbers and we need random numbers. This established a heritage that was passed on to computers and video game consoles. Eventually, we saw the release of Final Fantasy for the Famicom NES platform, and it was anything but final. Not only because the title would turn into a series and evolve far beyond the original entry, but also because it, probably needed a few code revisions before that code was considered final. The battle system is buggy, but unlike your traditional platform games where glitches are seen, most of the bugs remain behind the scenes, contained within the hidden math that will eventually produce the numbers we see during a fight. The logic and code behind all of this was picked apart long ago, and facts, strategy guides, and code disassembly have been available ever since. I want to get into how the battle system works with a focus on physical attacks. Why just physical attacks? Well, this is the code executed for a single physical attack. It consists of 781 total bytes, not including the contents of the various subroutines it calls. It is responsible for animation, damage calculation, and reporting the results on the battle screen. Now, let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. Rather than walk the code, I wrote some scripts to grab the numbers used for calculations and output the results to a console. This lets us peek into how we are getting the damaged numbers seen during battle, as well as understand how the bugs figure into it all. Now, the code I wrote to do all of this is amazing. Bad, but it should be accurate enough to let us fight a battle and see the details of what happens. Before diving into the details of an attack, let's tackle the numbers that get us there. When you start a game, you create a party of 4 by giving each of them a name and assigning a class. I don't want to get into a class tutorial here, but at the most basic level, class determines how good a character is for physical attacks and/or spells. We are interested in physical attacks, so let's just use the default party scene here. A fighter, thief, black belt, and red mage. Later in the game, these classes can be upgraded. I will be manipulating RAM throughout this video, so don't be surprised to see some of these classes upgraded at times. The class stats vary and will influence our battles. How many of those stats does the game let us see? The status screen can let us in on some of the values used in calculations during battle. It is far from comprehensive. And so, let's illustrate stats using a script that I'm running right now. If I press select, here it is. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it took a little time to program this, but I think being able to see the party numbers behind the scenes will really help us understand how they are used in battle. I can press left or right to cycle through the 4 party members and press select again to hide the overlay. With this overlay up and running, let's talk about these numbers. I've leveled up our characters a bit and upgraded our fighter to a knight. That will let us equip high-end gear easily. On the left in green, we have our current level and health, followed by strength, agility, intelligence, vitality, and luck. These basic stats will increase for each character as they level up. In the second column, representing our physical offensive stats, seen here in red, we have attack, accuracy, hits, and critical hit rate. For attack and accuracy, I used different terms than the ones found in the game's status screen, which were damage and hit percentage, respectively. Damage is not the amount of damage dealt during battle, it's a number that figures into damage, so let's call this one attack. Hit percentage is not a percentage, but is part of the logic for if you land a hit or not, so let's call it accuracy. The hits number is simply how many times we roll for damage for this character per round. Finally, crit rate, our chance to land a critical hit. There are 2 numbers here, the value itself, as well as a calculated percentage chance. You'll notice that despite the fact we have a crit rate of 0, as there is no weapon equipped at the moment, we still have a 0.5% chance to land a critical hit. These chances are easy to explain during the battle math, and even easier to explain using an illustration. So let's do just that and illustrate accuracy and crit chance as they are used during battle. When you attempt a physical attack, the game rolls a random number between 0 and 200. If you roll a 200, it is an automatic miss. Accuracy and crit values are irrelevant in this case. Otherwise, we continue with battle RNG having landed somewhere between 0 and 199. After having found our actual hit chance, which is a calculation that includes our accuracy stat, we compare it to battle RNG. If hit chance falls under battle RNG, it's a miss. If hit chance is greater than or equal to battle RNG, it's a hit. Then later, after the damage value is determined, the game checks for a critical hit. So our crit hit rate finally comes into play. If the battle RNG is less than or equal to the critical hit rate, we land a critical hit and go on to add some bonus damage to our current attack. Since we crit if we are less than or equal to battle RNG, this means rolling a 0 for battle RNG results in a critical hit no matter what. That is why I represented a critical hit rate of 0 as having a 0.5% chance to crit in our stats overlay screen. Since we only care about the critical hit chance after having eliminated the automatic miss battle RNG of 200, our range spans 0 to 199, or 200 different values. I therefore calculated the critical hit percentage using a denominator of 200. Other Final Fantasy resources may disagree on this calculation, but that's just what I used. Okay, let's talk about the origins for these 4 offensive stats. Best way to do this is to equip a weapon. If I edit RAM, I can add whatever weapons I want. The overlay script is constantly loading data from RAM, so it picks up the changes immediately. We'll add an early game weapon to slot 1. So now we can hide the overlay, go and equip the weapon, and now that weapon's numbers are factored into our offensive stats. I used an E with a dash to indicate when gear is equipped, similar to the weapon screen. So how did we get these offensive numbers? Attack is half our character's strength plus the weapon's power. Pretty simple. All integers, so taking half an odd strength value will have the decimal component truncated. I used green to represent numbers originating from our base stats to the left, and I used blue to indicate numbers coming from our equipped weapon, found inside this area in the middle. Our accuracy value comes from our character's base accuracy plus the equipped weapon's accuracy. Now there's no separate area of RAM that I know of that stores this base accuracy I have up here in green, but it can be back calculated by subtracting an equipped weapon's accuracy. Naturally, the strength and base accuracy stats increase as this character levels up. The stats aren't limited to the numbers for the weapon we have equipped. How do we know how many hits we have per attack? Hits are calculated as accuracy divided by 32 plus 1. I leveled up the characters a bit to fatten up the base stats, and we can see that the equipped weapon manages to get us over that first 32. This results in 2 hits. If we unequip the weapon, our hits fall back to 1 as we drop under that first 32 milestone. So even if you hang on to an early weapon from the game, the number of times it connects with an enemy in battle will increase as you level up and raise that base accuracy. How much it goes up depends on the character's class. Ah yes, and last but not least on the offensive front, where does this critical hit rate value come from? Because this number and that number don't match, do they? And with that, we've reached one of the biggest bugs in the entire game. Each weapon in the game has stats stored in the ROM. Each weapon's accuracy, attack power, and yes, critical hit rate are stored alongside 5 other values. When you enter battle, the game loads battle-related data into RAM. This process includes checking each of the 4 possible weapon slots for an equipped weapon. With an equipped weapon found, it should use the equipped weapon's ID as an index to locate that weapon's data in the ROM, look up the critical hit rate for that weapon, and save the retrieved critical hit rate to the appropriate place in RAM. It does all of this except step 2, load the critical hit rate. That means that once it finds the index for the weapon currently equipped, it writes the index value to the critical hit rate slot in RAM. Our current weapon is the 4th entry of the weapon information table in the ROM, therefore it gets a critical hit rate of 4. This number is less than half of the actual critical hit rate stored in the ROM. Let's add the would-be accurate critical hit rate to the overlay. I placed the number and calculated percentage into brackets to the right of the bugged number that is actually used during battle. Now the irony here is that, of course, the stored critical hit value is better than the index used, so it may appear that this bug is a terrible thing. But wait, the further in the game you progress, the better the weapons you find or purchase from a shop. This natural progression means we move further down the weapons table in ROM as we find better stuff. The index value continues to increase, and that means the bugged critical hit chance continues to increase. And that means that the weapon indices will eclipse the highest intended critical hit rate at some point. Of the 40 weapons stored in the ROM, the highest critical hit rate is a value of 30 for 2 late-game weapons, the Vorpal and Katana. By the time you reach those 2 weapons, the index exceeds 30. The second highest critical hit rate is 10. So that means that every weapon from this point down is guaranteed to have a higher critical hit rate than what is defined in the ROM for it. And of course that means if I start a game with 4 white mages and give them all Excalibur, thanks to finagling the equipment requirements, I won't just have a ridiculous party that can deal a lot of damage per swing, but also have a 20% chance of a critical hit on every hit that connects. I wonder how far we can make it like this. Who knows? Armor is probably going to be important at some point. Speaking of which, for every attack, there is some sort of defense, and that brings us to the defensive options, Absorb and Evade, seen here in yellow. Absorb will mitigate some damage dealt to the player. Some people call this stat Defense. This value is 0 as we do not have any armor equipped at the moment. Evade will reduce an enemy's chance to hit. The base value is always 48, and it gets a bonus from Agility. This is not a percentage, so I dropped the percent sign from the label here. Let's add some different types of armor to our inventory. Now we can equip multiple types of armor at the same time, but let's start with the chain armor alone. With that armor equipped, our absorb value is now 15. Our evade value goes down by 15 because equipping armor adds weight. We aren't as nimble now. Okay, let's equip the remaining armor and see how that changes our numbers. Our absorb value has reached 40. That is quite a bit of damage mitigation versus the 0 we had earlier. Meanwhile, evade has dropped to 43. The equipped totals for absorb and evade are written in orange down at the bottom of the overlay. While I had enough room for the absorb values, I ran out of room for evade. So if you want to know where we find this -17 value, just look down here. Finally, I wanted to point out this magic defense stat in purple. Even though we won't cover magic in this video, this stat can come into play for physical attacks. It is a hidden value not found on the status screen, and it increases as your character levels up. Wow, so there aren't a whole lot of stats here, but physical attacks require more than just a single damage value that is governed by RNG. Oh wait, if this wasn't enough, the Black Belt and Master classes play by their own rules. With a weapon equipped, attack power gets an extra +1 in addition to the half strength plus weapon damage calculation. But what is really interesting is what happens when you don't have a weapon equipped. With no weapon equipped, Black Belt and Master use their current level ×2 for both their attack power and their critical hit value. Also with no weapon equipped, the number of hits they have is doubled. So it's the same basic formula as everyone else, accuracy divided by 32 plus 1, but you double the result. Armor on these two classes also has an interesting quirk. With armor equipped, the absorb value is equal to the total armor absorption, just like any other class. However, with no armor equipped, the absorb rate is equal to the character's level. This creates an interesting combat strategy for the Black Belt and Master classes. How do you juggle equipping gear or not in order to maximize your stats? Well, okay, we now have a fairly detailed background on all of the base stats used as part of a physical attack. Time to take them into battle. This is the Final Fantasy battle screen. Our 4 party members are on the right side, and next to them are their names and current health. Enemies are in the larger box on the left, and their names are listed inside a box found in the bottom left corner. Players input the desired actions in this window down here, and then a round of battle plays out, with the results reported across several smaller windows that appear and disappear at the bottom of the screen. All enemy slots and all player slots are queued up at the start of the round and then shuffled. This is done by taking 2 random numbers and swapping the positions in the queue. 16 swaps are performed, and the results are the order of attacks for the current round. That's right, the agility stat has nothing to do with this. Okay, let's break down a player attack. In this battle, the party faces a single ghoul enemy. We'll focus on our knight's attack. He dealt 35 damage. How did we get that number? Let's run it again with the battle log. Now there is a lot of information here for reference. Let me talk you through the most pertinent stuff. Our calculated hit chance is 192, or 96%. This is the result of a starting chance of 168. This is a flat number used as a starting value for any party member or enemy, plus the knight's current accuracy value of 36, minus the ghoul's evade of 12. Now, other numbers could figure into this calculation if circumstances were different, such as when status ailments are involved, but this is a good basic example of a hit chance calculation. Note that if this calculation in parentheses were to exceed 255, it is reduced to 255 before the defender's evade is figured into it. You can let me know if you think this is fair or not. We know the final damage is 35. I placed that grand total above the hit details. We have 2 hits in this example. Let's get into them. For hit 1, we rolled a battle RNG of 101. That's very much in the middle of the range. Our hit chance is 192. The hit chance is not less than the battle RNG, so we hit. Time to roll for damage. The damage roll ranges from our attack power, 22, to our attack power times 2, which is 44. We rolled a 25, close to lower bound. So we take that value of 25, subtract the ghoul's absorb of 6, because Ghoulie has a little bit of defense here, and get our base damage for this hit, 19. Finally, we check for a critical hit using that same battle RNG of 101 and our critical hit rate value of 4. 4 is very low, and the battle RNG of 101 does not fall underneath it. Therefore, no critical hit this time. So our first hit is just 19. How about the second hit? This time the battle RNG is 182. Not good at all. That's pretty high. Fortunately, our hit chance is 192. We still managed to hit. The damage roll this time was 22. That's the worst possible, as it is the lower bound. Subtract the ghoul's absorb and we have 16. Add the 2 hits together, 19 plus 16 is 35. There is the damage dealt from our knight in this round. Now before the knight landed this attack, the ghoul's HP was 43. So those bad damage rolls may have prevented us from beating the ghoul, as he will still have 8 health remaining. Fortunately, the black belt goes next and finishes the job. How would things have been different had the knight landed a critical hit? Well, since we can control RNG through the emulator, I'll use the same save state for battle to keep all of our RNG the same, but I will intervene for the battle RNG for the knight's second hit and drop it to, say, 2. This time, our knight hit for 57 damage and finished off the ghoul, thanks to that critical hit. How was it figured into the attack? If you look at the details of hit number 2, you'll see that the damage roll of 22 was added as bonus damage, and the ghoul's absorb was not figured into this. Absorb is irrelevant for critical hits, so the second hit did 38 damage rather than 16. It more than doubled. Oh, by the way, there are some, shall we say, hidden gems of RNG, plus a few bugs, in this battle example. Let's back up to the ghoul's attack. The ghoul had 3 hits and attacked our knight. The hit chance is not very high at 137 or 68.5%, and only one of them connected, hit number 3. Notice the ghoul's attack power is 8, so the damage roll is between 8 and 16. Well, our knight's absorb is 40, so even if the ghoul rolled 16, the absorb would turn it negative. When the calculated damage goes negative, damage is set to a minimum value of 1. That is how the ghoul did 1 damage. A few other things of interest. Hit 1 and hit 2 rolled a battle RNG that was too high, so both hits missed. But both of them still checked for a critical hit despite missing. It seems like the coach had skipped past all the other checks once a miss is detected after checking battle RNG against hit chance, but it does not. Now mathematically this ends up being a non-issue, but logically we should skip over this, in my opinion. When we do hit on hit number 3, you'll notice a bit of extra work is done. The ghoul has a chance to stun. RNG is involved here. For ailments, the calculation starts at 100 and then has the defender's magic defense subtracted from it. See, I told you this stat would figure in at some point. So 100 minus 36 for our knight results in 64. We roll for ailment RNG, once again a number between 0 and 200, with 200 being an automatic miss, and get 157. The ailment will connect if our calculated chance is greater than or equal to ailment RNG. 64 is nowhere close to this, so the ailment does not hit. Our knight is therefore not stunned. Now, by what I assume to be the intended design, this ailment check should roll after every hit if that hit connects. We only connected with one hit, and it was the last one. We didn't get to see the others. If we had, we may have seen quite the ailment bug, which goes something like this. If we load our save state and advance 3 frames before starting our attack, we alter RNG. Now let's let the battle roll until the ghoul attacks. This time the ghoul attacked our thief and he was stunned. But look at how it happened. The first hit missed. The second hit connected. We rolled for ailment and were not stunned on this hit. So far so good. On the third hit, the ghoul missed. And yet, we not only rolled for an ailment despite missing, but our RNG roll was very low, and the ailment therefore connected. Our thief was stunned thanks to a miss by the ghoul. How did this happen? Here come the bugs. Logically, the game should check for an ailment possibility for each hit after it connects. Instead, it keeps a running total of hits connected for the attack and uses that to determine if an ailment roll should occur. If it is not 0, then roll for the ailment. Well, as soon as just one hit connects, it will always be not 0 for every hit that follows. Fortunately, there was only one hit left, as the ghoul has 3 hits per attack. Unfortunately, that was enough to stun our thief. If you were just watching battle as usual and saw that you were hit and stunned, you'd probably just figure, darn, he got me, I'm stunned. But if you know what happened behind the scenes, like in this example, you probably feel cheated, as the stun was delivered by a miss. Now these misses, with bugs, are thanks to comparing the battle RNG to the hit chance and determining that a miss occurred. However, if we run this instance of battle once again, but this time roll an automatic miss by forcing battle RNG to 200, the critical hit check and the ailment check are skipped. The destination in code after a miss is different for an automatic miss versus a hit chance-based miss. The automatic miss destination would seem to make more sense. The damage from hit 2 is dealt, but the ailment is not applied. Hit number 3 misses, and that's it. Are there more bugs than this? I'm glad you asked. You may have noticed that the ghoul is weak to fire and therefore attacks with fire. There is a bug that applies an enemy's weakness as the element of its attack when it checks to see if the defending party member has resistance to it. Let's check this bug out in more detail using a different enemy. So here we are facing a couple of scum. These enemies can attack with poison and are weak to fire and ice. The Aegis shield provides resistance to poison, and so I equipped each of my party members with one, once again thanks to a little relaxing of gear requirements, and so we should be able to minimize poison, right? The scum surprised us with this battle, so they went first. As the battle log rolls, we can see that ailment checks for poison are going up against your standard formula, 100 minus player magic defense. It doesn't seem like resistance from that Aegis shield makes any difference at all. We can see the attack ailment is poison for the scum, and yet the elements checked during attack are fire and ice, the scum's weakness, just like what we saw with the ghoul. Poison is the ailment applied when RNG allows it, but fire and ice were used during the resistance checks. So that should mean that even though it seems like we need poison resistance against scum, we actually need fire or ice resistance? Let's change out the Aegis shield for an ice shield. If we take the party into battle with a shield designed to resist fire, the poison chance is reduced to almost nothing. What a bug. Are there other bugs? Why, yes. These bone enemies are weak to fire. You would think that means you could equip a weapon that deals fire damage and it would provide an advantage. However, this is not the case. Let's give everyone a flame sword and enter the battle once again. Once each party member is assigned an enemy to attack, the red mage goes first. Despite having a weapon that does fire damage, that element is not considered when checking it against the enemy's weakness. No bonuses are granted here. The reason is because the logic doesn't use the weapon's element for the attack, it uses the player's element for attack. Players don't have elements, their equipment does. Following the red mage's attack, the knight attacks. If I modify the element checked and force it to be fire, which is what it should be, we can see how the bonuses would be added to the attack if this logic was working. This time, our attacking party member receives a bonus of plus 40 to accuracy. In the case of the knight, the total hit chance before enemy evasion exceeds 255. So, the value is first capped at 255 and then has the bones evasion of 12 subtracted from it. The hit chance remains quite high despite this. In addition, the knight's attack power receives a bonus of plus 4. Too bad this bonus damage from elemental weapons will never work. Hey, Nintendo Power Strategy Guide. What do you have to say about the Flame Sword? Particularly effective against ice monsters. Seems the same as against all other enemies. Goodness. What else? Well, one thing that does work properly involves darkness or blindness, added to either the attacker, the defender, or both. With darkness added to a defender, an enemy in this case, the chance for the attacker to hit goes up by 40. If the attacker has darkness, the chance for the attacker to hit goes down by 40. In fact, in this example, that same attacker missed due to a hit chance that was less than the battle RNG. If both the attacker and defender have darkness, the numbers cancel each other out. Both the minus 40 and plus 40 are seen here in the calculation for hit chance. Let's wrap it all up with something peculiar that happens when the defender is asleep or stunned. I'll run a sequence and set the enemies to be asleep and stunned to force the logic. Our thief receives a damage bonus of plus 25%. We can see this figured into our attack power here at the top as it boosts 32 up to 40, and this carries down to our damage RNG for any hit during this attack. Pretty significant when you figure in multiple hits as well as critical hit rolls during said attack. Although, funny enough, our second hit missed. Check out that battle RNG of 197. Our hit chance didn't stand a chance. Hang on a second. What happened to our chance to hit? It is locked at 84% from just that starting value of 168. Why wasn't attacker accuracy figured into this calculation? Let's examine the logic flow for special case checks prior to applying the attacker's accuracy and defender's evade to hit chance. We've covered most of this already. Logic checks if the attacker has darkness. If they don't, we skip down to check if the defender has darkness. If they do, we subtract 40 from the hit chance and just fall into the defender has darkness check. That's your basic logic flow for these cases. If no, skip to the next one. If so, apply numbers where necessary and then just flow into the next check. So we have the defender darkness check. Then the weakness logic checks to see if an elemental damage from the attacker does extra damage against a defender with a matching elemental weakness. Then we fall into the asleep or stunned check. Now at this point, logic flow has followed a standard pattern of no yes for each special case. But asleep or stunned is a bit odd. If the defender is not asleep or stunned, we skip ahead to apply the attacker's accuracy and the defender's evade. If they are immobile, thanks to being asleep or stunned, we apply a 25% bonus to attack power and then skip past applying the attacker's accuracy and the defender's evade. Sure, an enemy can evade when it is asleep, but why should the attacker also lose their accuracy bonus in this case? I think the intention here was to apply accuracy from the attacker, but skip subtracting the evade from the defender. So, the hit chance will always be 84% when an enemy is asleep or stunned unless one of these other special cases factored into it. Final Fantasy seems to have been designed and programmed at the same time, and it wasn't finished before it saw a release. And that seems like a very common occurrence based on the games we've seen on Behind the Code. Well, I hope you enjoyed this dive into the battle system of Final Fantasy. It took a long time to program the stat overlay and battle log, but I think they both helped explain the numbers behind the scenes. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. I also have a Patreon available if you are interested, and thanks for watching.